The sky over New Cerberus was the color of rust, and Jace Rennick had long since stopped pretending he didn't belong here. His boots crunched over the cracked soil of the salvage yard as he trudged toward the crumpled mass of an old terraformer engine, half buried beneath a shroud of sand and forgotten hope. The engine was worth a few credits if it still had a functional core, and Jace was 3 weeks behind on rent to a landlord who accepted payments in cash, parts, or pain. He dropped to one knee beside the heap and pried open a scorched panel. The stench of burnt insulation seeped out, mingling with the metallic tang of ozone that never seemed to leave the air. With a sigh, he pulled out his toolkit and got to work, fingers moving with the muscle memory of someone who knew machines better than people. Wire by wire, screw by screw, he dismantled it. His hands were steady, calloused, and stained with the quiet permanence of long labor. Jace had once been a rising star in the Martian Systems Engineering Guild, before conviction for illegal AI augmentation barred him from licensed work. He didn't talk about it, not because he was ashamed, but because out here, no one cared. Reputation didn't matter in the fringe colonies. What mattered was whether you could make things run again when the world around you was breaking down. A distant hum pulled his attention skyward. A courier drone, small and nondescript, descended into the yard on sputtering thrusters. Its presence was unusual. No one sent things to Jace. He wiped sweat from his forehead with the sleeve of his jumpsuit and stood as the drone settled into a patch of scorched earth, hissed out a burst of air, and opened its underbelly. A black polymer crate dropped with a solid thud, and the drone lifted off again without so much as a confirmation chime. Jace approached the crate cautiously. It was roughly waist-high, scuffed, and sealed with reinforced alloy clasps. A flickering display above the biometric lock pulsed with a message. Recipient, Jace Rennick, legal transfer of biological asset. His stomach tightened. There were stories about these kinds of deliveries. Mislabeling, smuggling, corporate experiments dumped into civilian hands under the guise of inheritance or disposal. He reached out and pressed his thumb to the scanner. The panel beeped once. Green light. The clasps disengaged with a mechanical sigh, and the lid cracked open. He took a step back. Inside, hunched and motionless, was something that resembled a wolf, but too large, too still, too wrong. Its fur was a coarse patchwork of charcoal and steel gray. Thick, muscular limbs curled under its body, as though even in sleep it was prepared to strike. A wide, blunt snout was flecked with scars, and jagged teeth jutted from beneath its upper lip. Around its neck was a collar embedded with a disabled tracking unit and a serial tag worn smooth with age. As the lid fully opened, the creature stirred. Golden eyes opened, unblinking and sharp. They fixed on Jace with the intelligence of a predator. Alert, measuring, ancient. The air between them froze. Jace didn't move. The creature didn't growl. It simply stared, then slowly, deliberately stood. Towering at the shoulder, its frame was built for strength and speed, tail low and still. Its eyes tracked every breath Jace took. His fingers inched toward the wrench at his belt. Then the creature did something unexpected. It looked at the container, then back at Jace, and lowered its head. Not submissively, but with something like resignation, as if it had already calculated every possible outcome of this meeting and chosen indifference. He exhaled slowly. "What the hell are you?" The creature didn't answer, of course, but it sat down with a grunt and shifted its weight, revealing a small data drive clamped to the inside of the crate. Jace reached for it, keeping one eye on the beast. It didn't react. Plugging the drive into his wrist pad, he accessed a single file. A message played, grainy and flickering. His uncle's face appeared. Older, grayer, eyes sunken but still sharp. Bran Rennick, the black sheep of the family, exobiologist turned recluse, presumed dead for over a decade. If you're seeing this, Jace, I'm gone. And he's yours now. His name is Vero. Don't trust anyone who comes looking for him. They'll lie, threaten, offer you riches, maybe even forgiveness. Don't give him up. He's not property. He's not a pet. He's what we made him to be. And he chose you. The recording ended. Jace sat in stunned silence as the implications settled over him. Vero, if that was its name, hadn't been dumped here randomly. This was intentional. A transfer. A trust. But from whom? Bran had disappeared after rumors surfaced of unauthorized genetic engineering, military involvement, and experimental xeno-DNA splicing. The kind of projects that vanished into black budgets and deniable operations. He looked back at Vero. The creature hadn't moved. So you're the legacy, Jace murmured. The wolf-like beast blinked, slow and deliberate. Jace spent the next hour gathering tools, his thoughts a tangle of speculation and unease. He found a large cargo cage, one of the old reinforced types used for transporting volatile salvage, and coaxed Vero into it with a combination of gestures and patience. To his surprise, the creature obeyed without aggression, stepping inside and curling into a silent watchfulness. Back in his workshop, Jace sealed the cage and activated the scan grid. The diagnostic display lit up with confused readings. Genetic profile, unknown. Biometrics, elevated. Neural mapping, complex, layered, impossible to categorize. It was unlike anything in the registered alien archives. Designed, not born. Possibly even sapient. He sat on a stool, elbows on knees, rubbing his eyes. This wasn't a wild animal. It wasn't a genetic pet. It was a living enigma wrapped in teeth and muscle, and someone had entrusted it to him without explanation or backup. That alone told him how dangerous it probably was. Later, as night settled over the yard and distant lightning pulsed across the desert horizon, Jace lay on a cot just a few meters from the cage. He couldn't sleep. Every creak of metal, every gust of wind through the panels above, made him twitch. Vero remained still, silent, statuesque, eyes half-lidded in a posture of waiting. Jace turned over and stared into the dark. This wasn't going to be just another job. Whatever his uncle had done, whatever this creature truly was, it had already changed the direction of his life. He was no longer just a mechanic. He was a caretaker of something powerful, unknown, and deeply illegal. A low growl echoed from the cage. Not hostile, more like a murmur, a sound of recognition. Jace sat up. I don't know what Bran thought he was doing, he said quietly, but I'm not letting them take you either. Vero opened his eyes, and in that moment, Jace could have sworn he understood. Not just instinct or training, but comprehension. The wind howled outside, shaking the roof with dry fury. Inside, a man and a monster sat in silence, bound by circumstance and something older, something not yet understood. And while neither knew exactly what the future held, one thing was certain. The world wouldn't be the same once they stepped back into it together. The morning after Vero arrived, Jace woke to find the creature sitting outside the cage, silent and unchained. He blinked, once, then again, certain he had locked the heavy doors and set the scan field. Yet there Vero sat, upright, eyes focused, tail flicking once with subtle precision, as if amused by Jace's surprise. He bolted upright, heart thudding. Ow! Vero didn't move. There were no signs of forced escape, no busted latches or fried circuits. Jace glanced at the cage, still locked from the outside. He swallowed. Right, he muttered. So we're skipping basic biology and going straight to science fiction. Got it. He reached slowly for a ration bar from the supply crate and held it out. Vero tilted his head, sniffed the air, then patted forward on silent paws and took the food delicately from his hand. No teeth, no aggression. Jace watched the way those golden eyes studied him, not with hunger, but with measured understanding. Whatever Vero was, he wasn't simply a creature. He was watching, evaluating, learning. "Okay," Jace said softly, lowering his voice instinctively. "I'll admit you're something else, but I still don't know why Bran sent you to me." He spent the next few hours combing through the data drive, decoding fragmented files buried behind ancient encryption. Most of it was junk, raw logs, half-finished genetic models, corrupted voice memos. But one file, buried under 3 firewalls and a falsified protocol, caught his eye. It was titled Vero_conditioned_immunity_LV9. He opened it. A diagram unfolded on the screen. DNA helixes overlaid with glowing xenostructures, annotations in Bran's dense handwriting, notes on accelerated adaptation and biochemical nullification. It wasn't just gene splicing. Bran had integrated something alien, possibly pre-human, in Vero's design. More importantly, the notes suggested Vero's immune system had adapted to reject all known diseases, poisons, and even nanite-based intrusion. No wonder corporations were hunting him. Jace leaned back, the implications settling like lead. If Vero's biology could be replicated, he wasn't just a specimen. He was the key to eradicating illness, rewriting organic limitations, even restructuring military resilience. He wasn't a pet. He was a revolution in fur and sinew. A knock at the workshop's outer door jolted him upright. No one knocked in New Cerberus. If someone wanted in, they came armed. This was too polite. Jace moved quietly, signaling Vero with a sharp glance. To his unease, Vero stepped into the shadows and disappeared like smoke, vanishing behind a pile of scrap with preternatural silence. He cracked the door. Outside stood a woman in a tailored coat, her posture military, hair scraped back in a regulation bun. A discreet black implant pulsed behind her left ear. "Corporate, Mr. Rennick?" Her voice was calm, professional. "My name is Dr. Kira Mock. I represent Oli Core Biotechnical Division. May I speak with you?" Jace didn't open the door further. "I don't take visitors. This is important." She offered a tight, manufactured smile. "We believe a dangerous experimental creature may have come into your possession. We're conducting a recovery operation. Non-hostile. You may be entitled to compensation." He held her gaze. "Don't know what you're talking about." She raised her wrist, flicked open a hollow image. Vero's face, frozen mid-snarl, surrounded by glowing biometric readouts, hovered between them. Jace didn't flinch. "Never seen it." Dr. Mock's smile didn't waver. "Mr. Rennick, we're offering a direct financial settlement in excess of 300,000 credits for the safe return of the asset. No questions asked. Walk away clean. 300,000. Jace imagined it. His debt's gone, new parts, a new ship, maybe even passage off this rock. A better life. Then he remembered the way Vero had looked at him that morning. The way he had chosen not to tear open the cage. The way he had sat beside him in silence, just breathing the same air. "I'll contact you if I see anything," he said, and shut the door before she could reply. Inside, Vero stepped from the shadows, eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "I just turned down more money than I've ever seen," Jace muttered. "For you." The creature blinked once. Days passed. They settled into a rhythm. Vero never barked or growled without cause. He never destroyed anything, never paced restlessly. He studied everything, machines, fire, even the way Jace adjusted bolts or resoldered wires. And sometimes, just sometimes, when Jace spoke to him, he'd tilt his head like he understood. Jace reinforced the doors, rewired the perimeter sensors, and put up jammers. He knew more would come, and they wouldn't offer money next time. But despite the growing danger, he didn't regret keeping Vero. The creature had become something more than a curiosity. He was a mystery, yes, but also a presence. Solid, watchful. In a way, Jace hadn't felt alone in weeks. One evening, as a storm rolled in over the dunes, the two sat beneath the open roof of the workshop, watching lightning tear through the clouds. Jace held a flask of water between his palms and said aloud, "I think Bran was scared. Not of you, but of what others would do to you. He wanted you somewhere small, invisible, someone no one would suspect. And I guess I was that someone." Vero looked at him, then looked away. And then, without prompting, Vero rose and walked to the far wall of the shop. He nosed open a panel Jace hadn't touched in years and stepped aside. Behind it was an old storage locker. Jace opened it slowly, recognizing Bran's seal etched on the lid. Inside were data cores, maps, and a full schematic for something called Project Haloform. Each file was tagged with priority codes and secured timestamp from at least 2 decades ago. It wasn't random. Jace pulled the first core and activated it. A hologram flickered to life. Bran again, younger this time, eyes full of urgency. They'll come for him, Jace. Not because of what he is, but because of what he can unlock. He remembers. He survived the process. That makes him the only successful Haloform candidate in existence. Keep him alive, and maybe we have a shot at making things right. The image cut out. Jace looked down at Vero. "You're not just immune. You're the blueprint." Outside, thunder cracked like a weapon. Jace stood and reached for his pack. "We can't stay here." Vero gave no protest as Jace began to move. His silence was understanding. The hunt had begun. And Jace, once a forgotten mechanic, was now in possession of the most dangerous secret in the galaxy. They would come. He knew that, but he was ready now, because for the first time in years, Jace Rennick had something worth fighting for. Rain was a rare thing on New Cerberus, but as Jace guided the grav truck across the skeletal remains of the old mining roads, sheets of it fell in curtains against the windshield, slicing visibility to a few meters. The engine hummed beneath him, modified from junkyard scraps and salvaged drone parts, held together more by grit than logic. Behind him, in the dim cargo compartment, Vero sat quietly amid the secured crates, his massive form hunched but alert. He never slept on the move. Not since they left the workshop. They'd been traveling for 5 days, sleeping in short bursts, changing routes every few hours. Jace had no illusions about evasion. Oli Kor had eyes everywhere, satellites, drones, and informants woven into every layer of fringe society. But Bran's maps had led them through regions even corp scouts avoided. Irradiated plains, magnet storm fields, dead colonies long since written off the planetary grid. It bought them time. Time to think, to plan, to learn. Jace pulled the truck to a halt beneath a rock overhang and shut off the engine. The rain drummed against the roof. The silence that followed was almost sacred. He opened the back hatch and looked at Vero. "We rest here," he said, his voice roughened by days of little sleep and less speech. "Storm will cover our signal." Vero stepped down without a word. He no longer hesitated around Jace. Whatever boundaries had existed between them had softened into a mutual rhythm. The trust, hard-won, was now woven into every shared look, every unspoken pause. Jace had started talking more, even when Vero said nothing. And though the creature never answered, sometimes a glance was enough to make Jace stop mid-sentence, as if a question had already been addressed. They built a small shelter beneath the overhang, using heat panels and ionized tarp. Jace lit a portable thermal lamp, and they sat by its pale glow, sharing the quiet. He opened a ration pack and passed a protein strip to Vero, who accepted it with the same solemnity as always. neither begging nor biting. Jace looked out into the rain, his thoughts circling the same questions that had haunted him since he'd opened that crate. What had Bran really done? What was Project Haloform, truly? The fragments they decoded painted a picture of reckless ambition, an attempt to biologically encode survival across any hostile environment. Vero was living proof. More than a test subject, he was legacy, experiment, and perhaps even sentient artifact. What do you remember? Jace asked suddenly. Anything? From before. Vero blinked slowly. Then, with surprising care, he extended one clawed paw and scraped a symbol into the mud. A perfect spiral, intersected by a broken triangle. Jace stared. That's not random. Vero met his eyes, then tilted his head toward the data cores stored in Jace's bag. The gesture was clear. Look deeper. At dawn, the storm broke. Jace powered up the drive and loaded one of the encrypted fragments Vero had gestured toward. This one was harder to access, layered with firewalls Bran had personally encoded, but Jace cracked it by aligning the spiral triangle symbol as the decryption key. The file unfolded into a burst of audio and text. Bran's voice filtered through, clipped urgent. Day 614. Vero is developing abstract recall. Symbols, spatial memory. He's not just adapting, he's building context. They think he's still a weapon, but he's moved past that. He doesn't just survive environments. He understands them, remembers them, connects them. The neural evolution is exponential. I think he's beginning to dream. The recording cut out with a mechanical pop. Jace sat still, absorbing the implications. Vero wasn't only immune, he was sentient. Not just smart, not just trained, but conscious. Perhaps even more aware than most humans. He looked at the creature, now standing at the cave entrance, watching the sun struggle through thinning clouds. The wind pressed against Vero's fur, but he didn't flinch. He looked forward calm, ready. Their moment of peace didn't last. The drone came low, fast, silent. By the time Jace noticed the glint in the sky, the warning beep of proximity sensors was already shrieking in his ear. He grabbed the pack and shouted, "Move!" Vero responded instantly, leaping into motion as a bolt of plasma tore through the overhang, shearing rock and igniting the tarp. Jace and Vero dove down the slope, dirt and flame erupting behind them. The grav truck exploded in a flash of white heat as a second bolt struck its core. Jace rolled, scrambled, blood in his mouth, the world ringing. Vero was already between him and the attackers. Figures in black armor crested the ridge. 3. No insignia, visors down. Only core covert operatives. They moved like predators. Coordinated. Cold. Jace drew the small phase pistol from his belt. Useless against that armor, but better than nothing. One of the agents raised a hand, palm out. Don't run. We only want the asset. Jace stood, wiped his lip. You'll have to go through me. Vero snarled then, deep and guttural, and lunged. The first operative didn't have time to scream. Vero's weight hit him like a landslide, claws slicing through armor as though it were foil. The second fired, striking Vero's flank, but the creature twisted, dodged, and shattered the man's visor with a single swipe. Blood sprayed, and the soldier dropped, twitching. The third turned to retreat. Jace fired. The bolt struck his knee, sending him sprawling. Vero stood over the last man, chest heaving, fur singed but eyes clear. Jace approached slowly. The soldier reached for something, a beacon. No, Jace snapped. Vero didn't hesitate. With one swift motion, the beacon was crushed. They stood in silence again, surrounded by scorched earth and smoldering wreckage. Jace's heart thundered in his chest, the adrenaline singing like fire through his veins. He looked at Vero, who now bore a long gash across his side. The creature staggered, then righted himself, steady but bleeding. Jace rushed to him. "You're hurt." Vero made no sound, just stood still as Jace opened his med pack and applied salve to the wound. The tissue around it pulsed, then began to knit, too fast, too perfect. Jace watched in awe. Bran had mentioned regeneration in his notes, but this was something more. It wasn't healing. It was rewriting. They moved again that night. No fire. No signals. Jace buried the corpses beneath rocks and metal, leaving no trace. He didn't ask Vero how he felt. He didn't need to. The creature had made its choice. The next morning, as the sun rose over a dead field of solar mirrors, Jace crouched beside a half-buried data relay Bran had flagged in the map files. It was old, abandoned during the first colonization wave, but still operational. He linked it to his wrist pad and sent a blind pulse on an encrypted band. If Bran had allies, they would answer. Vero stood behind him, tall and silent. "I think we're past the point of turning back," Jace said. The wind moved through broken panels and dust-choked turbines. For a moment, there was no response. Then a single signal blinked onto his screen, acknowledged. "Proceed to coordinates." Jace looked at Vero. "Someone's listening." The creature blinked slowly. Jace didn't know where they were headed next, only that it would be deeper into the forgotten zones, into whatever lay beyond the edge of the map Bran had left behind. And for the first time, the fear that gripped him didn't stem from running. It came from a sense that whatever was waiting had been waiting a long time. The desert fell away beneath them, replaced by jagged highlands choked with ash-colored trees and scorched stone. Jace guided the skimmer along an ancient ridge road, the engine purring with subdued urgency. The last coordinates from the encrypted signal led them toward what once had been Sector 13, a forgotten experimental zone scrubbed from official maps and sealed by planetary decree after a mysterious collapse decades ago. Now, its broken terrain stretched like a scar across the horizon, shadowed by rusting sky towers that pierced the mist like fractured needles. Vero crouched low at the rear of the skimmer, scanning the landscape with sharp, unblinking eyes. His wounds had faded entirely. Not even a scar remained where the blast had struck him days ago. Jace had watched the healing happen faster each time. The creature's body was changing, optimizing, evolving, and Jace wasn't sure if that made him safe or expendable. They arrived at the edge of a crater ringed by bent pylons and sunken concrete. A structure sat half-buried at the center, a dome reinforced with durasteel ribs, its surface etched with old hazard warnings and faded banners of the original Haloform initiative. The data ping confirmed this was the site. Jace dismounted. His boots hit gravel and dry dust. "This is it," he murmured, adjusting the strap on his gear pack. "Whatever Bran meant for us to find, it's in there." Vero leapt from the skimmer in one fluid motion and padded ahead, tail twitching once before he stilled, senses sharpened. They approached the dome's entrance together, silence wrapping around them like a cloak. A manual override port blinked dimly near the rusted hatch. Jace hooked in his data cable and forced a reboot. Sparks danced across the keypad, then the door wheezed open, exhaling a breath of ancient, recycled air. Inside, light flickered reluctantly to life. The interior had the hollow, sterile feel of a tomb. Rows of empty lab stations lined the corridor, glass panels shattered, equipment half-melted by old fire. The scent of ozone and decay hung in the air. Jace walked carefully, his fingers brushing the scorched edges of consoles as if afraid to wake something. They found the core chamber beyond a reinforced checkpoint, its doors sealed with 3 separate codes. Each one required decryption, but Bran had embedded access phrases into the last few files Vero had helped unlock. Jace entered them slowly, heartbeat tight in his throat. The final door hissed open. Beyond it stood a narrow control room encircling a vertical tank filled with blue suspension gel. Inside floated a humanoid figure. Female, suspended mid-motion, cables laced into her arms and spine. Her body bore the same spiral triangle insignia Vero had etched in the dirt days ago. Not a tattoo. A birthmark. Genetic. Prototype 0, Jace breathed. A hologram flared to life beside the tank. Brand's image, again younger, more driven, his voice stripped of pretense. If you're hearing this, then I failed to dismantle the Halo form archive. This, he gestured toward the floating woman, is Elira. She was the first. Vero was the last. You need both to finish what we started. Jace stared at the tank, his brain racing. The data wasn't just experimental. It was reproductive. Each candidate wasn't made, they were grown. Elira and Vero weren't subjects. They were siblings in design. Brand's hologram continued. We tried to map memory across genetic architecture, to build not just survival, but retained learning, intuition, evolution that remembers. Vero exceeded every threshold. But Elira, she held the key to transfer. She could teach others, not by code, but by proximity. She could spread the change. The recording paused, and Brand's eyes darkened. But the Corps saw only military potential. They didn't understand that this wasn't about warfare. It was about enduring, surviving extinction. Jace turned to Vero. The creature had stepped close to the tank, nose inches from the glass, his entire frame rigid. His pupils dilated. Recognition. Do you know her? Jace whispered. Vero didn't move. Brand's message ended with a single phrase. Wake her. Jace found the override controls embedded in the panel beneath the tank. His fingers hovered above the sequence. If I do this, we change the world. Vero looked at him and lowered his head. Not a nod, not submission, but something older. Permission. Jace entered the sequence. The gel began to drain, tubes disengaging, alarms muted under standby code. The figure inside twitched once, violently, then settled. Elira's eyes opened. They were the same gold as Vero's. Jace stepped back as the chamber's auxiliary systems kicked in. Elira fell gently into the cradle of the tank base, coughing fluid from her lungs. She didn't scream or panic. She breathed. Slowly, steadily. Her gaze moved to Vero, and something passed between them. Unspoken, unmeasured. Recognition without words. Elira stood on unsteady legs. Vero moved to her side, bracing her, and she leaned without hesitation. Jace knelt beside the control panel and began uploading the core data to a secure drive. Dozens of files, blueprints, sequences, everything Brand had protected. He didn't know if they could replicate what had made Vero or Elira, but he knew the core would stop at nothing to seize it. He sealed the core and turned. We have to go. Now. But was already too late. A low hum shivered through the floor. Outside, the ground trembled. Dust fell from ceiling vents. The long-range scanners blinked red. A ship. Not corporate. Not military. Something older. Jace scrambled to the surface with Vero and Elira behind him. As they cleared the dome, the sky above them tore open with descending light. A vessel unlike any Jace had seen floated down. A leviathan of interlocking plates and silent thrusters, iridescent and ancient. It landed without sound. The ramp extended. 3 figures emerged, tall, thin, wrapped in translucent material that shimmered like oil on water. Their faces were hidden, but their movements were precise, deliberate. Elira stepped forward. Jace moved to stop her, but Vero brushed his arm gently. Don't. She approached the figures. One raised a hand, palm open. Light danced between them, a language beyond sound. Jace couldn't understand it, but Elira did. Her posture changed, no longer uncertain. She turned once to look at Jace, and though she said nothing, the message was clear. We were never yours to keep. She and Vero stepped into the light. Jace watched, unable to speak, as the ramp closed and the ship lifted into the air with silent grace. Within seconds, it vanished. Gone. The desert wind returned, brushing dust across his boots. Silence filled the crater again. Jace stood there for a long time. Then, slowly, he reached in his pack and drew the drive holding every scrap of Haloform data. He looked at it. He could sell it, become rich, or he could destroy it and vanish into the dust like they had. But he didn't do either. Instead, he turned back toward the Deadlands, where other forgotten projects likely lay buried in the dirt. Places where knowledge had been hidden instead of shared. He began to walk, because maybe what Brand started wasn't meant to end with Vero. Maybe it was meant to begin with Jace.